Hi there. It's the 10th of May 2017. Um, it's so what it's we had the South Korean elections on the 9th of May, I believe. Well, that's when the results have just come in by the looks of it. Um, Moon Jae-in wins the presidency. Apparently he's quite left wing. We don't know a lot about him. Um, North Korean favorite, which doesn't bode well for Donald Trump right now, no doubt. And the same could be true of Macron in France. You know, these elections have been really quite massively pivotal because Macron might have just killed Frexit, which means he could have realistically killed Brexit. Um, I can't imagine Britain trying to do this on its own without taking countries within Europe with it. It could be that Macron's going to go over to the other side and he's on the dark side, but we just don't know. He's brand new, just to sort of like just destroy him on the merit that he's a politician and he's worked for some banking institution. We're all kind of embedded in these same banking institutions, one way or the other. Um, we need to know hard facts of whether he's good or bad, really, rather than just like destroying him before we absolutely know, because he could. We just don't know. We just don't know, and we've just got to be careful not to, because we all jumped on the same bandwagon, just saying how Europe would blame Europe for absolutely everything that ever happened that was bad in the universe, and that we needed Brexit, and then suddenly we feel it, and it's just the most horrible feeling, and that's a mistake that we've got to try and somehow rectify. As we're just going to go down it, you know, this is not the time to cut our anchors from Europe and head across the Atlantic, especially when a storm like we're expecting is coming in. This is a really daft time to cut ourselves off and to, you know, that's why I left England. I left England on the 23rd of June in the evening. I just knew, I felt it, and I knew it, and I felt really quite isolated about my opinions on Europe, because I'm not trying to sort of like say that Europe's perfect. Europe's got problems, no doubt, but to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know, can't we find ways of correcting the problems that we have and stuff like that, rather than just getting rid of it all and not trying to sort out a solution? That's a train crash. That's just a train crash. You know, that's a very foolish thing to do. That puts everyone in the United Kingdom in a very compromising situation, because you're chopping off the hand that feeds you. So we're past kind of all this election period. I know we've got the sort of like the legislative elections coming up in France, which is going to big part of how that power is administered. But nonetheless, a Macron victory has kind of it could be, you know, it could be the other way around. It could just be that Fillon got actually, you know, the right wing effectively got knocked out by Le Pen's victory, which divided the kind of right wing, and that's how they got Macron in. It could have been a completely engineered. He might be a complete coup. I'm not trying to say he's a good guy here. I'm not trying to say he's a bad guy. We do not know. We know he's worked in banking institutions, and we can pretty much put banking institutions at the sort of like at the head of everything that's going wrong in this world right now. But does that mean that's when someone, you know, we've got to understand how these systems work and everything else like that to work it. He might be an absolute genius. That's why he might be there. He's China's. China likes him, and the fact is, Germany's bought into the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank, and we mustn't forget that. And so we can see there's a massive correction that's coming in, because China wants to revert back to a gold standard. They want real value being brought back to the table, and that's all this is about, is bringing real value back to the table. And just so countries like America or the federal government can't just print off money without, you know, they're just printing money off. They're just buying everything with just monopoly money. And suddenly the rest of the world is saying, no, we're going to destroy this world if we play with this monopoly money game. There's got to be real value brought back to the table. We're just going to, end up in a mess like we're in. And we've got to stop this. And so you can see that, you know, there's two ways of sorting this out. There's an economic adjustment, like India's just been through, and that's going to be painful. But I tell you what, a war with the type of technology that we're bringing to the table, to bring all the nations together and to sort of break the euro, just so we can sort of like break up the European Union and then take the entire mass of that sort of like that hungry force, and it will be hungry if you break that, if it breaks the hand, cuts off the hand that feeds it, and then we can take that entire force and direct it into a war against Russia and Iran and Syria as a proxy war, called a proxy war with Syria, but not realizing that what Syria actually represents in the bigger picture. And during this time, I started off this with this whole narrative, obviously, and then when I wrote Laughing Gas, I went into a much more spiritual side to the journey in this, because I realised that there were people out there that could do the political side far better than I could, but there was not many people that I come from a family of channels, and I know that's really kind of weird and unusual, but nonetheless, that is the story of my life. That's just the way I was brought up, and many of the doors that have been opened in my life was because of those introductions into parents that channeled. And weird or not weird, it's not going to change the present sort of like my experience is not really going to massively change the sort of like what's brought us to this thing, this place we're at now. We've made a terrible mistake in Britain. We've ended up blaming Europe for all the things that Britain and NATO have done, and now we're starting to look very isolated and quite foolish, I think. And now a lot of us are sort of starting to regret this. And I feel that this election that's coming up now, we can turn that around. We have an opportunity to turn that around, because if we cut our anchors now at this time. You got to remember that we haven't, like I say, nothing worked out, so we don't know exactly what we're going to do to feed the 50, 60, 70 million people that are in Britain now. How do you keep the cogs moving? How do you keep the food coming in, and how do you especially if currencies are being corrected and we go and sort of like piss everyone off, and the only options we're leaving ourselves is this kind of aggressive solution, which Britain and America have always come back to, which is just pull the guns out. As I've tried to demonstrate with so much of my writing, so many of my videos, that's not really a possibility in the same way. When we rolled up into Tibet with 2 Maxim guns in 1901 or 1903 or whenever it was, and we mowed down the entire kind of like best part of the entire Tibetan army with just 2 guns, invited them out to negotiations and just mowed them down to show the power of technology. Like as I said in the last video, when in the invasion in 1950 of but the war, the Korean War, when the Americans entered to sort of like to aid the capitalists, the South Koreans, against their battles with the North Koreans, the communists. The Americans came in at the last minute, obviously, to negotiate bases and stuff like that if they entered, to sort of like to protect and help. They obviously had whatever they were going to take out of that, which was obviously a base and military bases and stuff like that, and trade links and all the rest of it. But China aided the North Koreans also at the last minute, like the Americans aided what are now the South Koreans. And China just sent men with pitchforks up against them. It was kind of reminiscent of how the British dealt with, the Tibetans, but in reverse. Just throwing the same situation. It's just increasing the number of peasants with pitchforks by such a vast amount that it was just impossible to kill that many. Just got, like I said, 35,000 troops, 35,000 American lives were lost. No way is China set a precedent by that, showing how unnecessary all this technology is, and how redundant it is against an angry mob. And they taught a valuable lesson in the way they handle things then, and we need to learn from those mistakes and look back in history a little bit. So I've kind of done that. We're at this place now where I've done all my flybys now. I'm not going to do any more flybys because really it's pointless. As I've demonstrated 2 times in a row, you can show the dates, but most people just think you're mad. And so I've done the last flybys. I did obviously the 20 the 25th of January 2017, and that flew by on the 21st. Obviously, you know, most people really don't believe it, and it's just, you would have thought that would have got some kind of press or something, but you can see that there's no way that I'm going to get past people's beliefs on this, no matter how many flybys. I've done 5 now, and the dates and the times, I've never, like I said, I've never been more than 4 days out, but it just, you know, we are kind of hell-bent as a nation on not seeing this, not acknowledging the earthquakes. You know, like I say, the kind of earthquake in the 8.8 earthquake in Chile, 2010, massive earthquake, one of the largest earthquakes ever recorded in actual fact, because there has been larger, but they've been kind of more relative to volcanoes, and so that was the largest single earthquake. And then obviously until 1 year and 2 weeks later, so the Earth went right round the sun back to its original position when the Chile earthquake occurred, and then moved two weeks further, and then you had the 9 point. Well, it's listed as a 9, but it was downgraded. It was originally listed as a 9.6, the Fukushima earthquake. You know, the whole country moved. The axis of the Earth actually moved, literally. So you're talking about something that's so big that it shifts the axis, moves, shunts countries, causes tsunamis, and ever since it entered into the central, came under the Earth and entered into the central hub of our solar system in 2012, and we've had all the tens of thousands of corroborated testimonies, videoing it, filming it, photographing it, you naming it. There's just been so much testimony. You know, I've put many videos up, and I'm obviously in touch with many other video makers now, and on Nibiru, and I've seen literally tens of thousands of amazing shots of Nemesis, Nibiru. I've seen it all, and yet we as a race can't believe it. Even though you've got Fukushima spewing out radioactive waste, which means we could have absolutely disactivated that nuclear power station before this thing came in, because the powers that be absolutely knew about this, which means on its way out, especially because of the 22nd of November earthquake in New Zealand and subsequent earthquake in, again, Fukushima, we can pretty much predict exactly when the next earthquake is, and we know the type of damage it causes, and all we're talking about is building more nuclear power stations. And Davy Dobbs is a fool, a madman, crazy idiot, talking nonsense. So I'm at the end of it, guys. I can't do any more. I can't offer any more flybys. I can't do anything, you know. And I'm just like, so I just thought, you know what? That's it. I can't do any more flybys. I've offered all the data. I've offered all the evidence. You know, I'm controlled by the lowest common denominator that controls who I am to you. And right now, we are either going to go down or we're going to go up. There's no middle way here. It's like Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. 80 men and 80 more could not place Humpty where he was before. That's where it originally came from, the English Civil War between the Cavaliers and the Roundheads, Cromwell and the parliamentarians and the royalists, or the royals, the monarchy, the king. Saying there is no middle road. George Bush, you're either with us or against us. No middle road. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Left and right wing politics. Just leaving you to sit on that wall where you don't vote. You're too cool for your own democracy. Too cool for it. Too smooth. Too unaffected by fascism. Too unaffected by all the depleted uranium your government has dumped on Iraq in the form of depleted uranium bombshells, all implemented by the apathy in the democratic system. 80 to 90% of Syrians vote for Assad. They have to risk gunfire. We're too cool for democracy. We're too cool for it. Slag anyone off as soon as they enter the field. We're not even interested in who they are. Blame Europe. Europe done it! There's a massive mistake that's happened here. That's why I just couldn't be in England for this process. I was so embarrassed. I had to be in France. I just could not be in that country at that time. I'm so sorry for anyone who felt like I abandoned them in that cycle. Especially my mum, and I go to and fro and visit her and that sort of stuff he's been dealing with. But I cannot be in England at the time, at this time, knowing what is being implemented. And knowing the serious loss of life that could be created by this situation of cutting Britain off, trying to break up the EU, trying to facilitate this complete and all-out war and this invasion of Syria. The birthplace, well, not the birthplace of Christ, but where his parents came from, the bloodline of Christ, the true bloodline, if there really was a bloodline. You know, we have to really think about the agendas that are driving this right now. What are they trying to do? Is this a blood sacrifice of the bloodline of Christ? Is this what the drinking of the blood literally means in the Catholic Church? Spilling the blood? Is this part of the sacrifice? Is this the same sacrifice that was done when Jesus was put on the cross? Is this why so many churches, especially Catholic churches, have to have Jesus dripping with blood on the cross? Is it the same agenda? Is this a blood sacrifice? Is Syria a blood sacrifice? How to reverse this mistake. So I've decided what I'm going to do is, I can't offer any more flyby dates because we've kind of done that now. We've had all the warning shots. We've had all that. You know, I've just had to stand up and be your little idiot, you know what I mean, shouting at something. And it's been good to be outside of England because then I haven't had to sort of like, you know, out here away from it. Most people don't understand me because my French is pretty shit. But in England, I feel like I'm too mad for my country at the moment. Too weird, too mad. You know, it's like, you know, for most they think I question climate change. And, you know, if anyone watches any of my videos and the amount of sort of like climate change that I have monitored, I don't diss climate change at all. But of course, those who want to bring me down will actually say that I do. But actually, it's just bigger than climate change. It's just vastly bigger than climate change. There's no model in climate change that has yet been put forward that can really explain in any way why the poles are shifting. There's no model in climate change that can explain why the floor of the Pacific Ocean is breaking up and causing the oceans to boil. There's no way to explain the sudden Fukushima anomaly unless we start bringing big gravitational masses into the equation beyond the story of little old Earth. There's something big out there affecting us. It's going round and round and round. You know, in my research, I've stayed very much with Nibiru, as in the furthest orbiting object, celestial object, whatever you want to call it, orbiting this very odd red dwarf thing, which is somehow massively shielded by something. Whether that's to protect us or whether that's just to conceal it, I do not know. I'm of a mind it's all there for our protection, because anything that can shield that off, that is that big up there in space, is so far ahead of our level of science on this earth that any such thing would have been so much bigger than, say, building the pyramids. It would have taken thousands of years to build. Such a thing that you'd have to assume that this is a very, very big story, and we're just waking up to the size of the story that we're in, and we're seeing this thing, this strange device that's obscuring this second sun, this dwarf planet, and sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't. Maybe it is just the bright lights of the sun that conceals it only. Maybe really it's all about that. Maybe there is more technology on the table than we understand. We just don't understand, but we didn't understand how to fly, but much more than 100 years ago. That didn't stop the birds from doing it, and it didn't stop other creatures from learning to fly, and eventually we got there. So just because we don't understand the science of how things work, it doesn't mean we can cancel them, because our own brains aren't sophisticated enough to understand. Our beliefs are just restrictors. That's all they are. We're just operated by a sneering belief in our heads. And you are coming to a juncture now where you can either become that sneering belief that you are, or you can become a much higher being and operate way beyond those restrictions of belief of what you believe and think you are. You can exceed that, and you can go so far beyond that. But I've done my time on this kind of like on this kind of nicey videos, and I've tried to put the data through, and I've tried to be really polite, and I've listened to the most disgusting commentary, some of the comments and stuff that I see out there and that sort of stuff, and I just think, yeah, I see what Brexit's done to my country. It's reduced it to, it's split our country down the middle. Those who have engineered this, you have split Britain down the middle. And you know, I see some of the characters that were very pro-Brexit, you know, and people that I really thought were really a lot more clued up, and now I start realising that perhaps their real intention was seeing what would happen if Britain left Europe and became isolated on its own. It would either drag the rest of the world into war, it would sort it out. It would rise above this horrible problem, that this stench of war and foul, demonic, the seat of absolute aggression and war that this country, that Britain's chosen to sort of like take at the moment in terms of sort of like aggression against so many nations. I really hope it's going to rise above that. You know, I'm not going to run in this election. I was so close to coming back, and then I thought, you know what, you've done it. You've done it. You've written the book. You know, so much of the stuff I've tried to do is to try and bring awareness to it, especially in Laughing Gas, especially in the videos I've done, especially with just constantly trying to put a flyby date on it. I knew it was going to be the end of my sort of like reputation for doing that, because when you talk absolute truth, you stand out on your own. It's part of the sort of like it's part of that process, isn't it? Of standing out there and shouting it out. You know, you talk a truth, and no matter how much evidence, you know, it's we all just, Britain's just turned on itself, just like the government's turned on the sort of like on the people. The people are kind of, they've just gone into blaming Europe, and I feel like I've lost my country. On that 23rd, I felt like I lost my country, and I can see there's an opportunity to change things back a little bit, but it will never be quite the same after that 23rd vote. You have to understand that's already going to come at a price, because too many have already locked on to the divorce honeypot, just like those locked on to the divorce honeypot when Thatcher wanted to sort of renew the lease with Hong Kong. Too many had got their eyes on the divorce honeypot, and China they'd long worked it out. There was no way she could reverse that, and it was just too much money on the table for the powers that be in Britain. And such is going to be the truth for all those bankers in Europe eyeing up Britain's divorce settlement. Now Article 50 is signed. Our only hope is to delay that and to prove that it was totally illegal and based on false information. That is our only hope, to overturn that. And the only one I can now see that can have any hope of doing that is now Jeremy Corbyn. And I would say to all of those who vote Green Party, I'd say, guys, that little battle it's got no relevance in this election whatsoever. You know, I'm a great fan of all the Green candidates, but we've just got to. We have a massive problem right now, and if we don't see the size of that problem and act on that, we are gonna break away from Europe, and it's gonna be ugly, guys, because it could really affect things catastrophically. Because this isn't just a simple choice of just trying to get out of Europe. This is a deliberate choice to try and derail Europe, to scuttle the whole European Union process. You know, it's not a good look. It's not a good look. That's why I don't want to be in England right now. I'm just like, I'm sorry. It's just like, I can't. You know, I've always taken a stand, a political stand, and if coming out here and doing this is you know, it's a political stand. You know, I'm loving France. I got to be honest with you, and you know, it's you know, I've struggled coming out here because I've missed a lot of my friends and family and everything else like that. But nonetheless, it's just like, what am I going to do? I write a whole book to say, don't break away from Europe. Don't do it. People just think I'm mad. It would never happen. No, it would never happen. I offer flybys for this thing, saying you're going to start seeing these flybys. Every time I see a flyby, more and more people just jump on the bandwagon to try and, you know, I feel like a total idiot. I am a total idiot, perhaps. Maybe I'm a total fucking loser. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just a total fucking loser. Europe really is the baddie. And my country is just full of supreme, beautiful beings. And the reason they don't care about the depleted uranium their governments dump on Iraq and any other country that doesn't bow to its economic hegemony. You know, we just don't care about that. We're too cool to care about that. Or anyone who sort of sees anything beyond it. It's just... But we've got past these elections now, and we're getting more and more isolated, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and we've got to decide which side of the fence we're on, or we're just humpties sitting in the middle. Too cool. Too cool to do anything about it. Just too cool. Too cool to see any of the real things happening on the earth right now, and all the geological changes that are happening as a result of this thing moving around. And remember, right now it's on the far side of the sun to us. Last year was a hell of a year. As we got close to it, the shots were sensational. Endless amounts of shots. Huge, great plasma charges between planets out there, visible. Photographs, video, you name it. Tens of thousands of epic shots. And most of my country is too cool for all of them. But you can't see it. So I thought, right now I'm going to read Laughing Gas. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read Laughing Gas. I'm going to read you Laughing Gas. Because I tried selling it. Can't sell it. When someone reads it, it's incredible. They have a real kind of reaction to it and that sort of stuff. But the media won't talk about it. Like I say, I can live outside the Guardian in a pink rickshaw. No newspaper will touch it. All the time you mention anything to do with the 40,000 times more radioactive waste that was generated by the Hiroshima bomb that was dumped on Iraq in the form of depleted uranium bombshells in Tony Blair's illegal Iraq war. Anytime you mention that, like Fukushima, it's a conspiracy story now, isn't it? Hasn't even happened. You can't even. The press doesn't talk about it. They're not allowed to cover it, which means if you talk about it, it's just a conspiracy story. Literally,